Benchwarmers, before I start discussing sports this week on the fifth and final installment of at least this series of Riding Pine, Nika will be back next week. He had some family business to take care of. Former guest of the show, his dad, Mark Bryant, is actually having his birthday this week, so Nika will be back soon. But before we start this last Riding the Pine episode, I wanted to give the appreciation that Nico and I talk about all the time. We can't believe that we have a show people follow on social media. Some people listen to us for their sports news, which if we're your only source of sports news, I think that you may be missing out. But we appreciate every single one of you who's taking the time to follow us on our social media pages, listen to us and subscribe to us on whatever podcasting platform you listen to, leaving a rating and a review, by the way. We will be reading that review that was just left on iTunes. We'll read that next week when Nico gets back. I don't want to steal that thunder away from him. But everybody who's done anything like that, you've told a friend about the podcast, you've worn one of our shirts, bought a sweatshirt, anything, it truly means the world to us. And it's really awesome to think that we can sit here. I'm sitting here in my girlfriend's apartment, Bree, who I'm going to give a shout out to as well because she volunteers her time and lets us use her fancy camera to film the videos for our YouTube channel. Everybody, the two of us don't exist. This show doesn't exist without those people, Bree, and you all listening. So I appreciate it. I wanted to start off by saying that because I feel like it had been a long time since we've acknowledged it. And I don't often get a chance to speak to you all by myself. I've been blessed to do that for the last 4, now 5 weeks. So I did want to thank you all because this time I was nervous when I first started this series. I didn't know, like when I was doing my own show by myself earlier, it didn't feel right. I didn't feel comfortable. And I think I'm finally, it pushed me out of my comfort zone and it pushed me to a place where now I feel a lot more comfortable talking to myself in the microphone and the camera. And I think it's helped develop me as a little bit more as a podcaster / broadcaster. So I'm grateful for that, and I'm grateful that you all decided to tune in this week to the far end of the bench. Riding the Pine, week 5. Be sure, like I mentioned, the social media pages that you guys are following us on, at FEOTV Pod. If you're in our bracket challenge, we'll be talking about March Madness coming up towards the end of the episode this week. But if you're in our bracket challenge, remember you have to be following at FEOTV Pod and subscribe to our YouTube channel in order to qualify for that $150 gift card if your bracket is the one that wins. And be sure leave a like and a comment on a YouTube video. You can respond to us, go back and forth with us. We'll respond to every single comment that we get on our YouTube channel. So be sure to subscribe, leave a like and a comment there. It helps us out. Tell a friend about the show. Listen to our new episodes every single Wednesday wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a 5-star rating and a review as well. We'll read that on the podcast. Okay, I finally got all the business stuff out of the way. And now we can start discussing the things that actually matter. Like, once again, I think I don't want to start it this way. And I know that we haven't given MLB its due diligence now that the lockout has ended. I talked a lot of shit about the lockout and how they were going to miss out on the games and how the game is dying. And then I turned around after they ended the lockout and didn't talk about it. But I will make this announcement coming up on Friday. Christian Saez, former guest of the show, he was on with his wife Marissa for the far end of the bench. He's also been a guest on my Center of Attention podcast, as well as the guy who actually hired me to the radio station at KWSB 91.1 FM, the guy who, depending on how you see me, blessed or cursed you all to hear the sultry sound of my voice on recording. Christian will be coming on, and we'll be doing a full MLB cheat sheet. We'll talk about this Rockies move that they got Chris Bryant, even though it seemed like they were going towards a rebuild. That will all be coming out this morning, or this Friday morning, in a bonus episode. So I'm going to start today off talking about NFL free agency. And it's been an interesting offseason. I mentioned it last week. It's been about 6 weeks since the Super Bowl ended, and there hasn't been a single time where I've sat down to make an outline for a show and the NFL isn't at the top of everybody's list. It happened again today. The NFL led the news cycle again, even though we just had 2 rounds of March Madness where a 15 seed made its way into the Sweet 16. Yet I have to begin talking about the NFL free agent period. Legal tampering started last week. Free agency officially started last Wednesday is when teams could officially sign. We saw Russell Wilson sign his Broncos contract. Randy Gregory, Deion Jones as well. Devontae Adams is a Las Vegas Raider, was offered more money by the Packers and decided that he wanted to go play with Derek Carr, his former college teammate up in Las Vegas. The strange thing about this offseason is that there have been plenty of free agency moves, true free agency moves. We've seen a couple teams have to move players due to cap necessity. The Dallas Cowboys no longer have a true number 1 wide receiver in Amari Cooper or defensive end threat in Randy Gregory because of their cap situation. And it's been those things mixed with a ton of trades, especially in the quarterback market, where we saw over the weekend Deshaun Watson played the Cleveland Browns like a fiddle, and in turn, Cleveland Browns played Baker Mayfield like a fiddle. The more and more I learned about this Deshaun Watson contract, the more I'm actually starting to lean against it. It was inevitable that it was going to happen, whether or not if he was found guilty of the criminal charges. Obviously, it would be a long time until he was going to be playing in the NFL again. What people don't necessarily realize about the situation is not only did he wasn't suspended last year. The Texans just sat him, and he just sat at home, so he was still collecting a paycheck every single week. Didn't miss out on a single game check. And now he's been able to finagle his way out of the terrible situation that would be trying to quarterback the Houston Texans during a rebuild. Gets the highest amount of guaranteed money ever given in the NFL, $230 million on a 5-year contract. That's $46 million per year, fully guaranteed. And we've all been talking about the fact that he's going to be facing a suspension in the NFL this season when he does come back after his civil suits are settled. When that happens and the player is suspended, you're fined for those games. You forfeit a portion of your contract, of your base salary on your contract. And the reason why Deshaun Watson went back and forth on whether or not he wanted to sign with the Browns was in order to get them to agree to a contract where his base salary, which is the salary that is eligible to be fined by the NFL during his suspension, however long that's going to be, his base salary is only $1 million. $1 million of a $230 million fully guaranteed contract. This guy swindled his way into now the max, I think, unless he's suspended for a full season, the max amount of suspension games that he's probably going to get. We're looking probably at about 10 games. That would be about $500,000 that he's missing out on out of a $230 million contract. And when he comes back, he's going to have all of that money to pay off his civil suits, if that's the route that he decides to go down. And it seems wrong. It feels wrong. And the argument comes up every now and then that if you had an issue with bad people playing professional sports, you would not be able to. You got to go watch like the G League or something, and even then, you're never going to find a sport or a team that's full of all choir boys. You're always going to have bad guys in a locker room that are unfortunately very talented at a children's game, and they're able to make a lot of money, and they're able to get a lot of leeway because of that. He's not even going to get punished, and when he gets punished, it's going to be the minimum amount of damage done to him. And if it's true, like, if any of the allegations are true of what he did, this dude is a predator. He needs to be on a list, and there should be a heftier penalty other than missing out on basically a year and a half of football, and still being able to walk away saying, wow, I'm going to make $230 million by the time this contract is up. I'm going to be able to play the game. I'm going to be in the public eye again. I'm going to be right back in the same situation that put me here in the first place. How do you not expect that to go the same exact way? Like, the definition of insanity is repeating the same action expecting a different result. Well, we're going to put Deshaun Watson in the same exact outcome, being the starting quarterback, making more money than he knows what to do with. Now, the only difference is he's in Cleveland instead of Houston. Houston's got the most strip clubs per capita of any other city in the U.S., and I don't think that's the same situation in Cleveland, but he's going to be able to find, like, you have that amount of money, you're going to be able to find something. It doesn't seem right. It doesn't sit well with me. It doesn't, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's not expected he was going to be back in the league. We all knew he was going to be back, and he was going to be playing, and as soon as the criminal charges cleared, everybody said, once that happened, the NFL, we're going to see exactly how moral the NFL is, exactly where NFL teams' morals lie. And we saw exactly where the Browns lie in that regard, where they give him a brand new contract, let him negotiate his way down to the least amount of finable money on that new contract. Oh, and now you have the number 1 overall pick that you drafted at quarterback from 3 years ago, who's pissed off at you, but you've already invested all that capital you could have paid him into this new quarterback. It seems like it's a bad situation. It's a bad setup. It looks like Jacoby Brissett is going to be the starting quarterback until Deshaun Watson is finished being suspended, whatever that suspension is going to be from the NFL. So it'll be interesting to see if Stefanski can tread these waters. What I don't necessarily get about this situation is the amount of hate and the amount of negative spin that this has gotten for guys like a Baker Mayfield, who I don't necessarily disagree that he's not always been the most mature guy in handling these kinds of situations. But think about it from his perspective. I know that if you're listening to this in Cleveland, you're not going to have any empathy for what Baker Mayfield is going through. But the team drafted you number 1 overall after going winless the season before. You end up starting and breaking some rookie records. The next season you start and it doesn't go well because your coach is an idiot. You get another chance. You get a new lease on life under Kevin Stefanski in a COVID season, and you make not only the most noise that you've ever made in a season since you came back to the city of Cleveland, you win your first playoff game in that same amount of time. And you're playing the eventual conference champion Kansas City Chiefs on the road in the playoffs. You play them to within 2 scores, and you feel good about yourself. And then we all know what happened this season. It could have been handled differently. I think the Browns should have kept Baker Mayfield out as soon as he was injured, and it was evident he could not play at the level that he wanted to. I give the guy props for being tough, but there's a fine line between tough and crazy, and he went fully over that line. He should not have been playing after, I think, about week 6. He should have shut it down, gotten the surgery. He would have been about ready to come back and start proving that he was going to be coming off this injury with a vengeance. Instead, we're left with now a pissed off Baker Mayfield, a team that doesn't want him but doesn't want to move him, or move him at least for a specific price. Are they going to get a first-round pick for a guy like Baker Mayfield back? No. The Cleveland Browns aren't going to be able to get that kind of return. They picked up his 5th-year option, so you might as well keep him around. You know that he's not going to be your backup quarterback, though, so you're basically wasting a roster spot. It's a strange time to be a Cleveland Browns fan. I don't understand it. Like, as a Cincinnati Bengals fan, we've been as down as many other franchises in the past, and there could have been a lot of negative people after that Super Bowl loss, and there are some, but like we at least understand where we're coming from. We at least understand that 2 seasons ago we had the number 1 overall pick, so yeah, we're disappointed we didn't win the Super Bowl, and we didn't do exactly what we wanted to do in the season, but we're not ready to blow things up just yet. I think you got to give it a little bit of time to marinate. How do we know that Baker Mayfield wasn't going to be a good starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns? We had 1 season where he didn't have a half-retarded coach, and 1 season where he wasn't walking around with 1 good arm. I don't think that you can necessarily gauge how good or how good he's not based on that small of a sample size, yet all of Cleveland is ready to move on right away and now vilify a guy who's done nothing except bring your franchise back to relevance. You remember the conversations surrounding the Cleveland Browns before Baker Mayfield was drafted? It was about how big of a laughingstock. They were the factory of sadness. It doesn't make any sense to me. The other big news in NFL offseason talk, obviously the Atlanta Falcons missed out on Deshaun Watson, so They are moved on from Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan pretty much said if they're going to go after Deshaun Watson that blatantly while I'm still under contract, I don't want to be playing for you. He handled it, I think, in a little bit better way than Baker Mayfield. He didn't come out come out in a press conference and basically state that he wanted to leave. Left on somewhat decent terms, and it ended up working out in his favor. He was traded to Indianapolis on Monday, and it was only for the third-round pick that Indianapolis picked up from the Carson Wentz deal. So you don't really lose anything. You pick up a starting quarterback. It's basically third time's a charm for what the Indianapolis Colts have been trying to do since Andrew Luck retired, where they just bring in an older quarterback who was in their prime in Phillip Rivers and an older quarterback who you thought was going to have a resurgent year in Carson Wentz. You're doing pretty much the same thing in Matt Ryan. But if Matt Ryan didn't have that 23-8 blown lead in the Super Bowl, we're remembering that MVP season a lot more fondly. We're remembering the fact that Matt Ryan is the godfather of quarterback footwork in the shotgun formation, which is what 85% of the NFL offenses run now. So this could end up being one of the best situations Matt Ryan could have walked himself into. He gets to play for a coach in Frank Reich, who was a former quarterback himself. He has an amazing running game, a stellar offensive line. He's not going to get beat up like he was the last few years in Atlanta. I think this is a great move for Matt Ryan, and it's a great move for the Indianapolis Colts because they finally have a somewhat competent quarterback. Their roster outside of the quarterback position the last 3 years has been good enough to at least be in the conversation for a conference championship game. Now they have the number one quarterback in the division in the AFC South and a clear path to the playoffs. It's a win-win situation for Matt Ryan and the Indianapolis Colts. That's the gist, the big news of the NFL free agency coming off of the weekend. I'm sure I'll miss something by the time this episode and video comes out on YouTube. We're going to be talking about NHL free agency because I skipped over hockey last week. That's coming up here on the Far End of the Bench podcast.